Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a Middle Eastern kind of week here when it comes to the news. Very important stuff in regards to some talks that seem to be constructive. They seem to be encouraging in regards to an Iranian nuclear deal. Iran is cooperating in a sense of negotiation, and they're offering something, and we're going to go through that here today. We've also got Donald Trump now. This is day 4 of the Middle Eastern swing, or maybe it's day 3. He's on to the UAE, recently visited Qatar along with Saudi Arabia, and so the UAE will be his final stop. He's doing that as we speak, but we're going to talk about the big stuff. We know Israel Palestine. Trump's been kind of wishy-washy on that. It's a very hard situation. It's extremely convoluted, but when it comes to Iran, it is to a degree relatively straightforward when it comes to a US MAGA perspective in terms of our involvement, or what we hope will be a lack thereof, in terms of what we want to do with Iran as it pertains to their nuclear program. It was reported over the last few months they are at around 60% uranium enrichment. If you talk to any expert when it comes to nuclear bombs or high level, high grade weapons, they'll tell you that it would be extremely easy, they think, presumably, for Iran to get to 90% enrichment. Going from 3% to 20% is a lot harder than going from 60% to 90%. So they hypothetically could have a nuclear grade weapon within the span of 2 or 3 weeks. That's if they're being honest about their 60%, and I believe they are because it's independently measured. But when it comes to this, you can see Iran is proposing potentially a different pathway forward with the United States. Their officials say their foreign minister has proposed a joint nuclear enrichment venture involving other Arab countries and American investment. It kind of reminds me of, at least in a different sense, to a potential Gaza Strip situation in terms of a lot of the Arab countries, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, maybe making investments. They say around $53 billion in terms of rebuilding Gaza. Now, obviously, there's a different situation because you're not talking about displacing people, but it is the idea of other Arab countries coming together. And we've also got a story on what happened with Syria and the just groundbreaking announcement that Trump made in terms of lifting sanctions for like the first time in 50 years since 1979, when they were originally blacklisted. Trump wants peace within the Middle East. This is the MAGA policy. We shed the neocon conservatism after Romney lost in 2012, and Trump, he could kind of see his legacy threatened by this Israel obsession and the Netanyahu stuff. And now you've got all these people that say, well, now Trump's not independent of Israel. It's just this ploy to get rid of Netanyahu because everyone hates Netanyahu. They're going to install someone else, and there'll be good normalized relations with Israel. But it's a key missing component. Donald Trump does not want to go to war with Iran. It goes against everything within MAGA. The idea that we would kickstart another Middle Eastern war, a never-ending Middle Eastern war, because they may or may not have nuclear capability. Pakistan has nuclear capability. They nearly used their nuclear bombs. They said it. That's why Vance and Rubio had to step in against India when they had their skirmish over the Kashmir region, which seemingly kicks up once or two times a decade. And if you look at the reported stuff on it, it's like Pakistan has a nuclear bomb. They threatened to use it. I'm not saying nuclear bombs are good, and it would be better if they didn't have it, if Iran didn't have it. But we cannot be this global force to where we're involving ourselves in all of these situations. It's just going to create more animosity when it comes to the Arab countries against America and the West in general. So it's just not worth it. And that's what Trump is saying. Now, when it comes to what deal we can work out, there's negotiations. Donald Trump has a hardline stance, like he always does with everything. He'll say things publicly and be very threatening, but we know behind the scenes is a different story. It is a tactic that Trump uses to try and get a better deal by using the public. But we're going to go through this and just talk about it. Iran has proposed the creation of a joint nuclear enrichment venture involving regional Arab countries and American investments as an alternative to Washington's demand that it dismantle its nuclear program, according to 4 Iranian officials that are familiar with the plan. They're talking to America's special envoy. On Tuesday, several Iranian media outlets published front-page accounts on Iran's new plan on the negotiating table. It is not immediately clear how feasible a regional nuclear venture might be. if it involved Iran and its two biggest rivals, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Iran and the US have not had diplomatic relations for 45 years. A private American company may also be. I mean, these numbers are just insane what Trump is trying to do in the Middle East, the amount of peace. You're talking about not having diplomatic relationships in 45 years, and you've also got this story. Trump shocks and delights Syrians by lifting sanctions after 45 years. This is risky, by the way. This is a very bold thing for Trump to do, and it is risky. And other Arab countries are going to like this. Trump is trying to do something completely different within the Middle East and really shed the United States and our reliance within the Middle East, as it should dissipate as we continue to find other energy sources and not have to rely on the Middle East so much for oil. At this point, it's about 24% of our oil comes from the Middle East. Most of our oil comes from Canada, and we also have fracking, and we also have other energy sources as well. So, but I mean, this just goes to show you the amount that Trump is trying to. I mean, we're talking about decades since there's been diplomatic relations with some of these Middle Eastern countries, and certainly we don't agree with their way of life, but our involvement with countries thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away needs to dissipate. Trump realizes it, he understands it, and it is this crazy turn. This is why it's like Trump is so volatile. Originally, it seemed like Israel had hit the jackpot. It's like, oh, Trump is this huge Zionist, Zion Don. He's displacing the Palestinians. He says it has to happen. I mean, maybe he still believes that. The problem is, if you do the two-state solution, there's just going to be another war in 2 years, so you can do that. But I mean, there's no right answer with the Israel-Palestine. There's really not. You could say the right answer is to stop funding Israel, but with AIPAC, that's really not feasible at this point in the way Congress is. So the point, we think in terms of what Trump wants to do, normalizing relationships with a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, creating these huge investment deals. And Trump did it in 2017, but now it's like double the amount of money. They're talking about like $10 trillion in total. I wouldn't get too excited about that. Normally they'll discuss figures and they'll say and create these huge headlines, and then there won't, there's not going to be that total investment. There's still going to be huge investment though. It's been announced that Qatar is buying around $200 billion worth of Boeing planes. You've got Qatar also giving Trump the jet. And I said that, Trump shouldn't accept that. But listen, it's one of those things to where we were going to get a new Air Force One. It's not ready until 2035. How do you delay it for 8 years? I mean, it's already been delayed for 8 years, though, I think. And they're saying now it's not even going to be ready until 2035. So I don't know. But I don't think the United States should be using a Middle Eastern foreign plane as their new Air Force One. It just, to me, it doesn't really make sense. But Trump, it is what it is. Apparently, it's going to go to his library, so we'll see what happens in terms of that. But listen, let's actually look at some of the details on this. It's a deal that would allow Iran to enrich uranium to 3.67% and would be similar to the 2015 nuclear agreement between Iran and the world powers. That was when Obama was in, and then Trump ripped it up because he said it was a bad deal, which is pretty crazy that this is even happening considering Trump ripped up the original agreement, and they're talking about this agreement being relatively similar. A lot of people thought Iran wouldn't want to negotiate with Trump again after he ripped up the original one that was negotiated under the Obama administration. But a major difference would be the on-the-ground presence of representatives from other countries, perhaps even the United States, to provide an extra layer of oversight and involvement. So they're saying they can enrich uranium to just under 4%, but within this deal, it would also involve oversight from other countries in terms of how they're enriching it and just watching over to make sure that it's within the reins of the agreement. The four Iranian officials said that unlike the 2015 deal, which had a 15-year expiration date, the joint venture would be permanent. That would allow Mr. Trump, who pulled the United States out of the deal, to argue that he obtained significantly more from Iran than Obama. So this deal, Trump could argue and propagandize is better by saying it's a permanent deal. There's not a 15-year expiration date on it. It is the 3.67% uranium enrichment level. That's the high. But there's going to be oversight from maybe the United States, from other officials from Middle Eastern countries as well. So, yeah, I mean, this is good that they're talking. There's no doubt about it. We'll see what Trump says in response to it. To me, it seems like they need to get some deal done. And it's just everything that Trump is doing within the Middle East at this point, even if you are a liberal, I mean, these are maneuvers that are extremely bold. And again, originally it was like, well, Israel was they hit the jackpot with Donald Trump, but because he does these swings and he doesn't want to be owned by anyone, he is now really hitting back against that idea and saying, well, no, you want to severely weaken Iran. We're not interested in another war with in the Middle East. It's not going to happen, whether it's proxy, whether we're giving you our intelligence. And Trump, it was reported, was really angry with Waltz and his involvement with Netanyahu. And now apparently he's not talking to Netanyahu at all. That's been leaked. It's come out. And so there's a little bit of a fractured relationship. And Netanyahu said, well, we can't rely on the United States for military aid. We have to wean off of it. That's what he said in a quote. So there seemingly is a fractured relationship right now. Now, to what extent is that really, there's these big swings with Trump. One day he'll hate someone, the next day he'll be buddy-buddy with them. So this is not to where it's like, well, the relationship is over. But certainly the thing with Trump is you have to see the actions that he does. And the action is, originally there was a suggestion within the cabinet to have the United States more hands-on and potentially do a joint strike on Iran and their nuclear facilities. Trump said, and by the way, a lot of the Trump administration said, that's not happening. And that's that is the, and look, we'll see. We wanted the deal to get done. We can't say, well, this is all happening. It hasn't gotten done yet. So let's get the deal done. And then we'll see what happens with Israel-Palestine in terms of hopefully solving that in the most peaceful way possible. Although Netanyahu said that they're really ramping up strikes on Gaza. Where are you hitting Gaza? Gaza's already completely destroyed. They're destroyed. You look at aerial photos of Gaza, it's obliterated. So I mean, I don't know, but they said they're ramping up more strikes against Gaza, or I guess against Hamas within Gaza. But either way, listen, when it comes to the Middle East, Trump wants to play peacemaker. He wants to have a legacy of being a peace president. You see some of the betting stuff. I mean, this is not the end all be all, obviously, but he's like the betting favorite now for the Nobel Peace Prize. These deals have to get done. They do, but imagine solving, to a degree at least, the Israel-Palestine situation. You're not going to make everyone happy, no matter how that gets solved. It's impossible. But still, solve that. End that hot war. End the potential threat of war with Iran. I mean, this is normalized relationship with, I mean, how about all the Arab countries and how happy they are, especially the big investors into the United States, like a Saudi Arabia, with our normalized relationships, with us lifting sanctions off of Syria. These are risky maneuvers, but he's trying to promote peace. And I think that's the bottom line on the takeaway when it comes to this Middle Eastern trip. A lot of diplomacy when it comes to where he's going, a lot of grandiose, grand gestures, business deals. But this is the big stuff. It's this Iran nuclear deal, and it's the Israel-Palestine situation. And so, and it's also lifting the sanctions off Syria. But we will see what happens in terms of this. There still has to be a deal that needs to be worked out. There was originally reports that they were postponing talks, but they're back on now, and they're talking to each other. And so that is a positive development. But either way, guys, make sure you follow me on X. Also, like this video down below. That's going to do it for this one.